Hi, welcome back to IDTV. I'm sitting here with the lovely Sarah Olson, who is basically most famous for the Lieutenant Watada story. Do you want to tell us a little bit briefly what that was all about?
Sure. Well, in 2006, in May of 2006, I was contacted by some anti-war organizers here in the Bay Area. They had been contacted by Lieutenant Watada. He had, at that point, he was a first lieutenant in the U.S. Army. And when he learned he was going to be deployed to Iraq, he did a lot of soul searching, kind of, as an officer is supposed to do. He tried to educate himself on, the issues, on what was happening in the areas where he was going to be deployed. And he came to the conclusion, after reading a bunch of books, that the Iraq War, he said, was immoral and illegal, and it was his duty and obligation as an officer to refuse to deploy. And so that's what he did on June 7th, 2006. He refused to deploy. He was then court-martialed, and actually his case is still unresolved.
Whoa. And how did you really get in contact with him?
Well, when he came up to the Bay Area to meet with, he was on leave from the Army. He was actually here, I think, perhaps at City College to see a friend's graduation. And he also took some time to meet with organizations in the Bay Area, and I went to, afterwards, I went with him to a radio studio and recorded an interview there.
All right. We do have a sound clip of what he actually said. Let's take a little listen to that.
It is my belief that this war is illegal. Any orders to force me to participate in it would be unlawful as well, and therefore it's my duty as an officer, according to my obligation to the Constitution and my oath, to refuse those orders to participate in a crime.
Yeah, and you almost got in trouble for this as well.
When Lieutenant Watada was court-martialed, the Army eventually subpoenaed me to testify at his pretrial hearing and at his court-martial. I had a lot of time to think about this, and ultimately what I argued was that it's not my job as a journalist to testify on behalf of the government or on behalf of the prosecution against my sources. I essentially said that doing so erodes the very necessary barriers between press and government, and it's really detrimental to the free flow of information, to the free functioning of the press, to be seen, essentially, to have a journalist be seen as the investigative arm of the government, right?
Yeah.
In addition, it erodes, or it has a chilling effect, both on people willing to speak publicly about their opposition to a government policy, and on the journalists willing to report these kinds of opposition. And everyone knows that, hopefully everyone knows that the kind of a functioning press, a functioning media, is the lifeblood of democracy. It's a necessary element to having an informed citizenry. And when you're hauling journalists in front of military tribunals to have them testify in effect, against their sources, you're not as likely to have a free flow of information.
Exactly. How was it to be an independent journalist in that, when it was all that heated? Who backed you up?
Well, it was interesting. A lot of people tend to think that independent journalists are not well equipped to defend themselves in these kinds of situations. And what I found was actually that I was really well prepared or well empowered to defend myself. I was able to choose my own lawyer, to make my own decisions, to decide what I was going to do in a way that many reporters who are employed at a paper or at a radio station, in a way that many journalists there don't have the ability to do, because they sign contracts saying that they'll abide by this or that regulation. And so I found myself actually in a very good position.
Why is this cause still important? Because we started, it was 2006, it's 2008 now. Why is it still important?
I think there's a couple answers to that question. I mean, the first is just obviously that Lieutenant Watada's case is still unresolved.
Yeah.
But more importantly, I think the issue of what to do with GI resistance in the military while this country is still at war is also unresolved.
Yeah.
And essentially, you know, between 2006 and 2008, we've seen GI opposition to the war really exploding in this country.
This is something like we all need to check out, and like free the press. It's important to have a very free press there. Thank you so much for joining us, Sarah.
Thank you for having me.
You should totally look this up on internet because there's a very interesting story that we fortunately can't really cover all today.